we could please have the clerk take the roll.
Councilmember Henry?
Here.
Councilmember Halls?
Here.
Councilmember Howdigi is absent. Councilmember Naren?
Here.
Councilmember Wilden?
Here.
Vice Mayor Matthews?
Here.
Mayor Alinsky.
Here, thank you. All right, this is a work session this evening. There's only one item for discussion tonight, and it is the review of the budgeted revenues and expenses for the city's 2020-2021 fiscal year budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kirsten Lennon, the Financial Services Director for the city. And this is a very strange way to do this. But it's nice, a little bit of extra space for you all. So tonight we're going to go over the proposed budget for the city, and this is your opportunity to ask questions and see all the numbers before we go into the tentative, which will be adopted hopefully in June. So, oops, too far. So this is just a basic overview of what the schedule looks like, and you've seen this slide several times. It's just a reminder of where we are in the process. We still plan on doing citizen engagement, even with COVID-19. We are having a town hall meeting on the 27th, right? And then we are also still planning on doing some local organizations and going to speak to them and give them a presentation. And we're doing an all-employee go-to meeting, which should be very interesting, and presenting the budget. And we've sent it out and said, okay, we can take 50 at a time. So if we have more than 50 people, we'll do it twice or how many ever times it takes to get that information out. So as you can see on the calendar, we are in the April through June timeframe, and we're meeting with you to discuss the budget. And the rest of the process is basically to adopt the tentative in July and adopt the final in June, and then we submit it to GFOA for a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award in September, and then we start all over. So for fiscal year 2021, our current proposed budget is $227,325. This budget includes all grant opportunities, all reserves, carryover, indirect cost, operating transfers in and out, and you have the detail of all the expenditures in the proposed budget document that was with the packet. This total budget is a 4.22% increase over fiscal year 2020's budget, but the general fund is actually down by 1.74%. So we decreased the general fund budget by 1.74%. So this is just to kind of show you the breakdown of that $79 million and how it's broken out. You know, it seems like it's a lot of money and it seems like a huge budget. 34% of it is the general fund and 34% of it is the water fund. And the other funds, the wastewater fund's 9%, and the other smaller funds like HERF and transit and library are in the special revenues, and so that's 18% of the budget.
Kirsten, if you don't mind, before you go on, if you could just explain, because we have folks here in the audience and listening as well tonight on television. I think most would expect that there'd be a decrease in this year's budget, so can you explain in layman's terms why there would be an increase?
For our total budget, because we do budget everything. We budget all expenditures that we anticipate, all grants that we could receive, all of our carryover balances, all of our reserves, everything that we possibly could have, so that our expenditure limitation is set at that. So if something were to happen in 6 months after the budget's adopted and we didn't set our expenditure limitation high enough and we needed to expend more money, we couldn't. We wouldn't be allowed to. We have to stick with that dollar value. So we make sure that everything that is possible is budgeted.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add a couple of specifics. So the water rates have gone up, or will go up this year. Wastewater went up last year. It's going up again this year. So those two funds alone will have more revenues, given the same number of customers. So that'll be an increase. We also, we'll talk about it later, we put extra money in the grant funding. So we created what we called a phased-in budget. So if we do better, we have money to do projects or employee things or whatever council desires. So we created a very flexible budget. So back to her point, we didn't want to go too low overall. and then be in a bad place. So some of the increases specifically are in the water fund, wastewater, and then in the grants fund that we did. Also, as she mentioned, several big projects we have rolled over that we did not do this year. The FEMA grant was significant for the Old Town flood project, getting it out of the floodplain. Mingus, we hope to do after the first of the new fiscal year. The road diet, and so it goes on and on. All those things that carried over that we would have hoped that money would have been expended, and it wasn't. So there are specific things in there, and then of course about a $500,000 grant fund in there for if we do better than expected and we can have money to finish projects. You'll see when we get to the CIP list, the project list, we have things budgeted and we have things phased in, and so it's really for those projects or employee expenditures come January, February.
And some of the rollover is because we carried over some projects into this fiscal year that we're discussing tonight to get our budget balanced, given the COVID-19 impact.
Exactly correct. We decided to put some off. Some were off because of programming issues. So the road diet we were going to do, and the contractor, whatnot, isn't going to work till after July 1st. But the sidewalk on Main Street is one we specifically put off till next year just to make sure we had the resources. You guys received an email today about the HERF funding. We don't have our numbers yet, but it was not good news. So my guess is her funding will probably be lower than she has budgeted. And remember, we have staff budgeted in HERF in addition to projects. So it's not just a project-based thing. So it's not very good news there either. But again, we don't have those numbers yet. 260 water line is a water project that we've carried over for several years. It's a lot of money, 1-point-something million, I think.
Almost $2 million, yeah. It's almost $2 million.
Almost $2 million. So there's a lot of those projects. The plans are, I think we were told 90% complete. So I'm hoping we'll get the 260 water line complete this next year. But there are several specific projects that we put off just in case because of the COVID loss of revenue. But then there are some that just we didn't get completed for different reasons.
But the fact that the general fund is shrinking by 1.5% is a key indicator that we do anticipate sales tax revenue to be down.
Yes.
Almost 0.75%. 1.74.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The budget is down 1.74.
All right, thank you.
So the next slide is really the general fund. It's just to show you all the different departments that make up the general fund. The general fund budget for fiscal year 2020 was $27,750,000, and for 2021, it's $27,266,000. There are some noted decreases in different department budgets, some of which is from some staffing decreases that happened throughout the year, and then the staffing decreases that we did for the budget, and also some other items that were carried over into next year. And I wanted to let you know that in the budget, the proposed budget that you had in your document, that's page 6 through page 36, and that's all the detail. It shows you every line item for every department's budget. So if you have any questions or you see those and you want to go look and see what's budgeted, you have every single line item that is budgeted. So budget components. This is how we get to our large number. Is all these different things. Revenues, including anticipated grants, carryovers, expenditures, including anticipated grants, and their matching, which often when we get a grant, it's not 100%. It's usually a percentage, like we provide 25% of the grant and they provide 75%. We have reserves, and then we have indirect costs and operating transfers in and out. So the next slide is just kind of a breakdown to kind of explain how we get to that point. So $79 million seems like a lot of money, and it seems like, oh my gosh, how can the city of Cottonwood budget $79 million? Well, the actual revenues that we anticipate is $39 million, and the actual expenditures are $44, and that's because we're using some of our fund balance in the water and the wastewater to cover some of those projects that are larger dollar values, some things that were carried over into the next year. So like he said, Mingus Avenue is carried over into next year. The water line is carried over to next year. What else? The streets projects, the street striping carried over to next year, which makes next year's actual expenditures seem really large. But really, it's just because part of them have been carried over from 2020 to 2021. And it just kind of gives you a realistic view of what our actual expenses are. I mean, when we had the presentation for the CAFR this year, one of the questions was, what were our actual expenditures? And it was, I think, like 34 or 36 million. So really, we don't spend the 79 million that's in the budget. That's everything we could think of plus carryover that is included in the budget document. And then this year for the revenue increase, it's partially due to the water and wastewater rate increases. So one of the topics we always talk about is our debt. It's been a topic of discussion for many years, and if you look at this graph, you can see that in 2010, we owed $56 million, and in 2020, we owe $37 million. And partially this decrease is due to the refinancing that we did in 2015 and 2016, which got us a lower interest rate. We didn't change the terms of those bonds, and the length of them, we just decreased the interest rate, refinanced it, and got a better term. We also got some forgivable monies for the WIFA loans to complete projects. The 260 water line is one of those. $800,000 of that project is forgivable, so they didn't even charge us for that. We only have to spend the $1.1 million, and the $800,000 is covered by the WIFA loan. So, reserves. This is an area where we have been directed by council to increase our reserves and to look at putting more money in reserves. And we always budget, and it's part of our policy to budget the 16.67%, which is supposedly a 60-day coverage of our general fund expenses. That doesn't include water, wastewater, and HERF, and the library, which are large items. It's just general fund expenses. So a 16.67% 60-day coverage of the general fund for next year would be $3.5 million. And it's based on this year's 2020's revenues and expenditures and where we were for 2020. So we always set aside the $1 million for CIP, which is capital improvement projects, and that was set at a flat $1 million a few years ago by council. All the interest, that money is just sitting there, all that interest gets rolled over into the general fund. Not that it's all that much, because interest rates are not very good right now. And then we have an undesignated reserve of $62,520 that is budgeted in council's budget, and that's usually set aside for council to do a project that maybe we didn't budget, that they feel like they want to do. 2 years ago, it was the curtains in here. This year, it was, I forget now.
Housing.
The housing study. And that's all that's been spent out of that was the $10,000 this year for the housing study. And every year, we set that aside for council to be able to expend on whatever, project or event or thing that they feel is necessary to spend that on. And then we have the half-cent sales tax reserves. These were set by you in 2019 when we enacted the new half-cent sales tax, and you requested that 85% of that money be set aside for reserves or for projects. And so you can see the breakout there that we put $603,000 into HERF, and then money towards the pension liability and transit and infrastructure and capital, and then a general fund reserve. It's just cash set aside.
And Kirsten, can you just go back one slide? You're wrapped up on this one, right? You're wrapped up on the other?
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that our debt, thanks to this council, is going down. I just wanted to just put a punctuation. We don't have the reserves we had in years past, but we are making a dent there.
And we also didn't add any debt when we built the wastewater treatment plant. So we have not added any real debt in a few years. So it is a good sign to see that going down.
Do you have a number sometime just to see what we're saving in debt service, that 2010 versus 2020?
I can look that up, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
It'd just be good to have, which I assume we're taking advantage of. That goes into the
Yeah.
mix.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to, if I could, point out on this slide here, the general fund, the 16.67%, is not cash. We don't have that amount in cash. That's cash and assets. Is that correct?
Right, which assets are anything that can be easily liquidated, so vehicles, buildings, small things that could be sold off. I also wanted to point out that this year, in 2020, Council directed us to spend the reserve that was designated for the pension liability. It was $259,000, something like that, somewhere close to there, on streets instead of putting it towards the pension, since that pension liability is still growing, but it doesn't seem like it'll make a huge impact on that unfunded liability. So this year, in 2020, you directed us to spend that on sidewalk projects instead, and we did. So that is a choice that you could elect to do that again in this next budget year and put that as for projects. And we've actually asked Robert to come up with a listing of projects that he could fund with that money. So operating transfers. What are operating transfers? So there are several funds in the Special Revenue Fund that don't support themselves. They just do not bring in enough money to cover all their expenditures. And the main four are the library, which the general fund covers almost $900,000 of the library's annual budget. And the library's annual budget is $1 million. And then the airport does not cover all of its expenditures, and the general fund is covering a portion. And you'll see this is kind of a large amount for the airport this year, and that's because we currently have a part-time airport manager, and we have budgeted for him to be able to be full-time as long as he gets grant revenue to cover. He's got to bring in the money to cover his full-time hours. So in the cemetery as well is a little higher because we plan on doing a project for doing some water lines in the cemetery. And then the grant funds is large due to a FEMA grant and then some additional funding that we put in there as a fallback. If the revenues come in higher, we can go and do some projects that we hadn't been able to budget. So all anticipated grants is an expenditure of $6.4 million and the revenues of $5.5 million. And our largest grants are our transit program, which, thanks to the CARES Act, should be 100% funded until they run out of money. They have the funding in there to cover all of it. We don't have to give our match starting in February, moving forward until that CARES Act money is gone. CDBG, we're working on that right now. That's the park master plan and the wayfinding signs. It's started and partially budgeted in fiscal year 20 and the remainder in 2021.
Kirsten, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What's our match typically on those transit?
Transit, it varies. The operations of 58-42, and then the administration's an 80-20, and then capital's like 90-10. It just depends on what part of the transit program it is.
But our match is going to be covered by CARES, and that's reflected in the budget?
It isn't reflected in the budget, but it's a very small dollar value, and if things go well, or don't go well, we can use that general fund revenue that's in the budget currently budgeted towards transit in the general fund if needed.
Okay.
I didn't want to move it out and then have it not happen, not get the CARES Act money from them. So this is Ron's favorite slide every time. This is a snapshot. This is one day. This is not today. As of March 31st, this is what was in the bank as far as cash. So if you look at the general fund, on March 31st, we had $3 million in the general fund in cash. If you look at the water and the wastewater fund, we had $10 million in wastewater and then $2 in wastewater. This doesn't include any of the money that's owed back to the general fund because the general fund covers all expenditures and then is reimbursed by the other funds. So every month that we spend approximately $3 million on all of our expenses, including payroll. It all comes from the general fund, and then the other funds reimburse the general fund.
Mr. Mayor, when we talk about increasing reserves, that's the number there that we'd like to have more than a month's worth of free-floating cash in the reserves. It's one of the reason I think council raised the sales tax a couple years ago and stuff like that, that in my opinion, it's like living check to check. Now, we're solid, we can do it, we're fine, but I don't think it's where we want to be.
And then anything on the lower section, those are reserves are designated. And some of that is our debt service. We have to hold aside an annual debt service payment in reserves for the WIFA loans, and we put aside every month the amount the debt service payment is at the end of the year so that we know it's available to pay those debts at the end of the year.
Okay. Vice Mayor, do you have a question?
I do, just so that I don't forget it. On that wastewater, when we're looking at wastewater reserves, I understand there's the wastewater reserve, and there's also the money that we get for capacity fees?
Yes.
So that number I'm looking at, is that both of those numbers?
Yes.
Okay. So,
And we have not received a large sum of capacity fees yet. I mean, it's not built up yet.
Okay.
So. And then if you see at the bottom, the excise bond and debt service, we still have some money in the excise bond that's sitting out there until we do Mingus Avenue. That's reserved for Mingus Avenue, the construction. This is basically just to show you the breakdown of our sales tax. In 2019, 54% of our sales tax was retail sales. That's all the stores that sell goods and also auto sales and other items. And then you can see on this graph that 17% is food for home consumption. So 74% of our sales tax is sales at the grocery stores and in the big box stores and auto sales. The other items are much smaller, like our restaurant and bar is 9%. But this is the money that was taken out when I looked at calculating sales tax. I'm thinking, what do I look at? Where do I decrease? Well, restaurant and bar, hotel, motel, even amusement, that's going to go down. All these things that normally are a little bit higher are going to go down. So that's what's going to drop during this time. And retail sales, because people aren't going to go out and buy big items. They're going to buy food. So when I looked at March's numbers even, our food for home consumption skyrocketed, but everything else went down. So this is the anticipated gross sales tax amounts for the last 10 years. And you can see on the graph that we anticipate for gross sales to go down next year based on what's happened and the economy, and listening to the state and the other cities and hearing what they're saying about their sales tax. In total, it's a 5% decrease from 2019 to 2021. So 1.5% decrease this year and a 3.5% decrease next year.
Has the state provided any projections at all?
No, they have not sent us anything besides, the information that Ron sent out today on the HERF.
And it didn't, Mr. Mayor, and it didn't come with a very good explanation. It was just a graph. The legislature's meeting again, at least half of it is. We saw that what HERF did, or what ADOT did, was they budgeted what they call the skinny budget, which looked pretty thin to me, but they have yet to tell us what our portion of that is. So you'll see here in a minute what we're guessing we're going to get, but it's bleak.
Did you say we got our March sales tax numbers?
We did get our March sales tax numbers.
Are we going to cover what that looked like compared to what we expected?
Well, I didn't budget it. When I did my projections, I didn't say March is going to be this, April would be this, blah, blah, blah. I said we would be down by this percentage. So, we were down in a lot of categories, and we were up in some. Retail sales for food, home for food consumption was up because everybody went out and bought a ton of groceries in March because of the pandemic.
Mr. Mayor, if I can ask though, but the numbers didn't make you want to change anything up or down?
But I'm very conservative. I mean, I would rather be under and be really projecting under than be projecting way over, and then in 2 months I'm coming back to you and going, okay, we have to cut everything. We have to stop. So I think it's better to be conservative and look and think that things are going to be down, and knowing based on what we saw here with everything being empty, completely empty and closed down for a month and a half, then have to come back and ask for you to change it after the fact.
Are we in line with what you're seeing your colleagues do across the state?
We're actually not projecting as bad of losses as everyone else. I have, the last I heard, City of Phoenix is projecting 25% across the board of their budget, and they have a very large budget. Tempe furloughed and laid off all their part-time employees. They don't even plan on opening their libraries, their parks, or any of their recreational arts centers until July. So they, of course, are projecting very large losses. The state is projecting huge losses. I actually have the numbers somewhere.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add, there was a mayor's call, and many of the mayors that spoke on behalf of the league, the average was 15 to 20% cut is what most cities were expecting. This goes back to us being the commerce center for the Verde Valley. I think has really helped us. I know this doesn't look like good news, but compared to our neighbors, this is better than what they're budgeting. Some have different amounts of reserves to handle the reductions, but this is one of the lowest loss projections I've seen with my peers.
I guess what concerns me about that, though, is if we're not being conservative enough.
So we can always adopt the tentative, and we can adopt a lower final budget. So you just can't go up. Once you've adopted and set that expenditure limitation, you can't go above it, but you can go down. So we should have all of our numbers for at least May by the end of June, early July, before we adopt the final budget.
But as you explained to me in person, I think we all had an opportunity to meet with you separately and your staff. There is enough in this budget, this proposed budget, that we could shift around if we are off on our projections. Correct?
I think this is a very flexible budget in both directions. If we're better off than we're expecting, we have grant reserves that we will be able to move in to spend so that we can do projects or make personnel moves or those kinds of things. We also have projects in there that we will not start till later in the year. So if things are worse than we expected, or if there's a second round of closures or anything like that, we have projects that we could hold off if we had to in there. So I think this is actually a very flexible budget in either direction. I think we have to prepare for that given the unknowns.
So this is a slide to just show you the current sales tax projections for ending this year and for next year. And it also has the numbers of what would have happened if we didn't pass the half-cent sales tax. We would be back at the 2017 numbers or below. Well, at 2017 numbers, which would have been really hard to budget that. It would have been really hard to go back that many years and decrease the revenues by that much. So the additional half-cent sales tax, as I said earlier, council directed us to put most of that into reserves or into projects. It's an 85% of that half-cent. For fiscal year 2019, it wasn't the same breakdown. That was the first year because it was only a partial year. So this just shows you what was set aside for those items and for that in those percentages for all 3 years since that was enacted. And again, we transferred the pension money to the sidewalks for 2020. So state sales tax. We got numbers in March from the state, but then they turned around and told us, don't look at those, because that's when everything started to close and the economy started to go down. So they basically said, those are not going to be what we give you. That's not what I budgeted. I did not budget the numbers they gave us. Those were way up.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add, $500,000. So when they gave us the numbers in March, the budget conversations we were having with the team were very different. That's why we're late to the game here. We started over. Very different conversations. This slide here was about $500,000 more than we're now expecting.
And the only one that does increase and looks like it's good is the urban revenue sharing, because that's figures from 2 years previous. So that's the income tax from 2 years ago. So in 2 years, we'll probably see a dip from those funds. Also, the HERF revenues look lower due to the fact that we got a one-time payment this year of $192,000 that was part of, and I can never remember the statute when I want to, so I'm not going to try. But it was just a one-time, they were going to, from that $32 fee that they charge for the vehicle registrations. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, we do have a water rate increase, a wastewater water rate increase going into effect July 1st. Everybody has been notified. It is in the bills. We have put a flyer in the bills stating that the rates are going up and giving them those rates and locations that they can look the rates up as well if they'd like, and a phone number to call. And we just wanted to remind you that that was approved last year and that it is going to happen. And then you can see the water capacity fees are not very high. And then the wastewater rates are going up as well. And that was also enacted last July, and that they'll be going up on July 1st. And then the capacity fees for wastewater are higher. We do charge more for those and have more. Arizona State Retirement. We talk about this every year. The rate for Arizona State Retirement is going up by 0.11%. The total budget for fiscal year 21 for Arizona State Retirement is almost $1 million. And that's for all your general employees that are not public safety. And that's 140 employees. And then public safety retirement is also going up. This is the unfunded liability, large portion. That's why we put that money aside, but it wouldn't make that big of a difference, so we're not really going to apply it to this. But the budget for fiscal year 21 is $2 million for public safety retirement, and that's about 60 employees. So it's a large dollar value, and it's also a large increase. It's almost 10% next year for the police departments, for the city's portion of the police pensions.
Would that also include the fire department?
Yes, the fire department is going up by 3%, 2%.
So the two
They're
entities, police and fire, don't have the same ratios?
No. It's based on number of employees, how many disabilities, how many retirements. And the fire department was a lot smaller for a very long time, and now they're almost the same size.
So we can anticipate their pension liability going up?
Well, hopefully it won't. And anyone who started after 2011 is in one of the new tiers, which some of the rules that they made with the new Tier 3 are much better. You can only make a certain dollar value. You have to work a longer period of time. The original pension was you could make what you made, and you retired at 20 years, no matter how old you were. And now in some of the new policies, it's you can only make $110,000 a year. You have to work for 25 years, and you have to be over 51. So they've added some rules to it to help keep it funded, keep you contributing longer. So our health insurance is also going up. It's going up by 10%. This is actually I think our largest increase since we've been with Kairos and with.
We've had only one increase that was larger.
Yeah.
And that was 8 years ago or so.
Yeah. And I think everyone every year health insurance goes up. We did not change our allocation of how much we pay towards our employees' health insurance. It's the same. We still cover 100% for employees, 80% of the children, 70% of spouse, and 60% of family. But with this increase, it's also going to cause employees to bring home less money. Because if they have dependents on health insurance, they're going to be paying more into their health insurance.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to repeat that because it's one of the saddest parts. There's some sad things in this budget. This is one of them. So if you're an ASRS employee, so regular state employee retirement, you're going to be paying more for your retirement, and you're going to be paying more for your health insurance if you have dependent health care with no COLA or merit. So your take-home pay goes down in July. As we go through this budget, if there was a way to fix that, that's one of the first things I'd like to see us address, if it's at all possible. It's hard to take home less pay than you did the week before. So it's just sad. You know, it is what it is. We didn't increase the percent, so we continue to meet that. We still offer free health insurance for employees only. Still a great plan, great benefits. It just the cost went up this year.
So compensation. Minimum wage potentially could go up in January. That was part of the bill that was passed a few years ago. It was a set amount until 2021, and then they're going to do it by a cost of living adjustment. We don't know what that is yet. They haven't told us. So when we find out, we will let you know.
So
we did
2021, pardon me, Kirsten, 2021 is the cost of living adjustment?
Yeah, that's the first year at 2021. It will be a cost of living adjustment instead of a flat dollar value.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hulse, I'm hopeful this year it was $1, so in January of this year it went up a whole $1. We're hoping it's down to pennies from now on. The good news is it's mostly our part-time employees, so we'll be able to absorb it without an increase to our part-time budget. But it's one of the things you'll see in here that we've asked for in our phased-in budget is a market study, because the higher minimum wage goes, we have not made adjustment to other positions. We have positions that are getting closer and closer to minimum wage, transit drivers. The list is significant. So it's one of the reasons I really would like to do a market study if we can afford it later in the year. I don't know that we can, but the minimum wage has had several negative effects on the overall salary structure, the formula.
So we don't have budgeted a COLA or a merit. And then, like I already said, Arizona State retirement and health insurance are both increasing. So staffing changes. In April, we furloughed all of our part-time employees. We were closed. It saved us $120,000. We furloughed three full-time employees, and they're scheduled to come back along with our part-timers on June 29th. Well, 30th, right? This helped us with our carryover to next year to help with our deficit that we originally had for this year. So we also implemented a reduction in force, and we eliminated four full-time positions and one part-time position, and that was a savings of $332,000 for next year, which is basically how our budget is 1% lower than it is for this year. Other staffing changes. Currently, we have a vacant court clerk position, and we're not going to fill that position until January. And in the budget currently, we have allowed for the municipal judge to go to 80% instead of 60% full-time, closer to full-time. And we are paying for that out of that vacant court clerk position. In this year, next fiscal year, we transferred one of the rec center's front desk supervisors to economic development, and she does all the reservations for the facilities, including this. So she'll be right down the way, able to come up here, show the clubhouse, get people renting. She also does all the rentals for the rec center and for the wastewater meeting room. And she's going to also help out currently with administration, finance, and economic development's front desk. And so she's kind of going to be like a rotating where we need her at this time. Finance department currently has 2 vacant positions, and they've been vacant for 4 months, and we're not filling them, and we don't plan on filling one of them unless things look better, and one will budget and fill in July if we can, and that's the accounting specialist that we got approved this year. So she's going to come over and help us for a little while until we get at least one more person in our office. So other staffing changes. We had $1 million in requests for new staffing or reclassifications. We have budgeted 3 new positions, and they're all in utilities. None of them are in the general fund. Utilities is going to have a wastewater operator 3, an arsenic treatment specialist 2, and a water operator 3. And we are trying to help with, they've had some issues with getting people with that right certification. And if we give a higher level of certification job, then we can kind of get people to get certified, which is why we also included in our budget a certification pay program, where if you're an operator 1 and you get an operator 2 certification, we'll give you a stipend or cert pay to cover the fact that you took that initiative and went and got your 2 until we have the budget authority or the positions to promote you to a 2. A couple of the other reclassifications were maintenance, and we're reclassifying the current foreman to a facilities superintendent. Part of this year, we moved out all the maintenance from the recreation center. That was 1 full-time supervisor, 2 full-time employees, and 3 part-timers. And we moved them all over into public works under maintenance. So he got basically 5 new employees. We demoted the supervisor position down to just a maintenance position because it became vacant, and we just lowered it and hired a maintenance person to replace that. And so he's now responsible for 5 new people. And
Kirsten, let me just add on that, because we don't just talk about people, but he also took over responsibility for the buildings. So now the rec center and the library and the ball fields, because some of our other part-timers that worked for Parks and Rec also ended up under him. It has been a great move, better service at the rec center and library and the fields. We outsource less, so they used to have to send more specialized work out. They would hire, someone to come in and do the work. They don't have to do that anymore. They're cross-trained support. It's been very successful so far.
we're also reclassifying a rec coordinator 3 to a parks and recreation manager. And we're also reclassifying a public works manager to a street superintendent. So currently there's a public works manager and then the foreman, and they both oversee maintenance and streets. We're just gonna shift them. One's gonna be totally over maintenance and the other one will be totally over the streets crew. And then the regulatory, this title, the Regulatory Compliance, Safety, and Education Administrator is going to be reclassified to Wastewater and Compliance Manager. Of these changes, only $24,000 of that affects the general fund. The rest is water and wastewater. I didn't mention, we're also changing our official, or suggesting to change our officials' pay for our softball, volleyball, and basketball officials from $18 an hour to $25 an hour. And that's because everywhere around us pays $25 an hour, and we would call them up and schedule them, and they would cancel because they would get to go do Sedona's field games for $25. So we need to make sure that we're competitive in that market. So capital requests versus budgeted. We had almost $26 million in capital requests, and we budgeted 16. Now, that seems like a lot of money, but most of it is water and wastewater and streets. These were, some of the streets items were carryover items. Some of them, all of them are carryover items. the street striping, some finishing up some pavement, finishing up some sidewalks, and then Mingus. The water and wastewater are projects that need to happen, one of which is some rehab at the Mingus plant. And then the grant funds, which is another large item, and $1 million of that is money that we always budget $500,000 every year for grant funds in case we get a large grant. We want to be able to actually use those funds, but we increased it by the $500,000 this year to make sure that if the economy turns out better than we anticipated, we can do our phase 1 projects, which are listed there at $437,000. So, noted departmental changes. We didn't add any vehicles to our enterprise lease program. We signed up for that leasing program 2 years ago, and we purchased all of basically our police fleet and then a couple admin vehicles, some white fleet. And we're not adding any vehicles this year or this next year.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to prep for, if I'm fortunate enough to be here again next year, we will add vehicles next year. We have vehicles that they pray to start when they get in the car. We were able to move some more around this year to replace really old ones. We had one that was in an accident of no fault of our employee. We were able to move another vehicle around. So we have done reallocations and movement of vehicles for the last 2 years. So we've actually decreased the size of our fleet over the last 2 years. But next year, just as a heads up, it'll be pretty important that we add some vehicles for our staff next year.
How is the lease program working out? Is that paying off well for us?
It's saving us a lot in maintenance on the vehicles.
Okay.
And they're very responsive, too, because like even the vehicle that got in an accident, we said, well, we might replace it with one of these vehicles. And they gave us quotes, and they did everything. And then we decided to turn around and transfer another vehicle over there instead. And they're like, okay, just tell us when you need us. So administration, we eliminated a position and a half there. We fully funded the airport manager position if grant funding is received. So that is in the budget, and he is aware that he has to get grant funding to be fully funded. After Tuesday's meeting, we are revamping TVR, and then we did budget. I budgeted $50,000 for expenditures, but I also budgeted $15,000 in revenues. So basically, you can spend $35,000 on an event. We removed the chamber contract, which in fiscal year 2020 was $230,000. Well, our bed tax estimate total for next year is $201,000. So the contract would have been decreased anyway. But instead, we have eliminated that contract, and we have funded $100,000 in economic development for marketing, for direct marketing, just to go towards marketing and nothing else. The Humane Society asked for a small increase for next year, and we have budgeted that increase. And then this fiscal year in 2020, we didn't fully fund our whole communications. We have 21 positions, and we only funded 19 in fiscal year 2020. And what we said is, if you fill, we'll let you fill those positions, but they had not been fully staffed in all the time that the communication center had been here. So it was a good way to maybe save some money in our budget, knowing that if things were good, we could fill those positions. Well, they were almost fully staffed.
No, they were for a week.
For a week. They were fully staffed for a week. And now they're down 2. So but we did fully fund them so that hopefully next year, they will be fully staffed. And then that will be good because they also decreased their overtime budget for next year, thinking that they would be fully staffed.
And the outside agency program is funded to last year's level, correct?
Yes. Okay. I skipped that one, sorry. Outside agency funding is budgeted at $100,000, just like it was last year. And we will start the grant programs soon. Actually, Jeff and I were talking about it today.
And Mr. Mayor, that's another area, of course, everything's up for discussion, but another area of concern that I don't think is probably enough given our community right now and the needs that we hear about out there. And I'll also just, as a heads up, The Humane Society contract has not been negotiated yet. We're in the middle of negotiations right now. The reason it only went up a little bit was because of some ad hoc costs that we would have to absorb. So we're not in agreement yet, just to be transparent on that. So I don't know what that will end up looking like. As you know, they perform a service we're required to perform. So we'll have to figure out how to meet in the middle. But this was reasonable. This was within this increase and was within their contract. But the changes they're suggesting add outside costs, additional costs outside the normal contract. So we're not in agreement yet, so stay tuned.
So some other noted department changes. We added funding for a community cleanup into Public Works. That's $20,000. And the engineer is already working with the other local agencies, and we're going to do a community cleanup with everyone sometime in the fall. We moved both ordinance enforcement officers under community development, just a managing thing, that way that they're together, working together all the time. Transit anticipates to receive 100% funding from ADOT and no local match until the funds run out, which I mentioned earlier, and that's all from the CARES Act.
And Kristen, I should have asked earlier, but roughly what is that amount of money that we would
So
have to
for
spend
this
next?
fiscal year, it's $133,000, and for next year, it was $166,000. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it is definitely money that is nice to get from the CARES Act. Let's see. We increased miscellaneous grants fund to $1 million, as we mentioned before, just in case our revenues come in higher than I anticipated. Maybe I am being too conservative, although I don't think I am being too conservative. Matter of fact, I think I told Ron a couple times I didn't think I was being conservative enough. And then we moved $15,000 that was budgeted under streets for a contract to clean up Old Town street sidewalks every day. And we moved that into maintenance to allow them to get another part-time employee to check on the trash cans down here in Old Town daily or a couple times a day, and then check on our public restrooms and make sure that they're clean and are fully stocked. And that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions or if there's anything in the budget you would like to discuss.
Council, we can ask staff any questions right now. I know we have chamber representatives that came in tonight, and they did want us to read this letter out loud. We can read the letter now, or we can have discussion now. What's your preference? Okay. So it says, Dear Cottonwood City Council members, on behalf of the Cottonwood Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, we would like to thank you for the work you are doing for our community during these unprecedented times. The challenges that we all are facing, remind us of the importance of community and partnerships. The Chamber of Commerce understands the extremely difficult decisions that need to be made for our community. The current climate in the community and the country has left us all vulnerable, pondering budget reductions and questioning what the future holds. It has also shown us what an amazing community that we are blessed to live in. The beauty that surrounds us, family, friends, neighbors come together and support each other. With the foregoing in mind, the purpose of this letter is to ask you to reconsider the city's decision to end its longstanding partnership with the Chamber. As explained hereafter, the value that the city receives in return for its investment in the Chamber greatly exceeds any short-term savings that might be realized by ending the relationship. Since 2004, the Chamber has served as the destination marketing organization for the city of Cottonwood. The Chamber has utilized its portion of the bed tax to promote and expand tourism and economic development in Cottonwood and the surrounding area. These efforts include the following. 1, staffing and maintaining a community visitor center, which is officially designated as an Arizona Office of Tourism, Arizona Visitor Information Center. 2, promoting tourism through Arizona Office of Tourism programs, which maximizes every dollar spent. 3, working regionally with the Sedona Verde Valley Tourism Council, extending the average visitor stay in the Verde Valley, increasing bed tax dollars. 4, working with Cottonwood Economic Development Council to promote and support businesses and nonprofits. 5, spearheading, developing, and continuing to support the emerging wine industry through the Verde Valley Wine Trail. 6, supporting education with Cottonwood, Oak Creek School District, Mingus Union High School, and Yavapai College. 7, workforce development in partnership with Yavapai College, APS, VV Rio, Arizona Work, DES, and NACOG. 8, building community through promotion of city, chamber, and state park events like Verde River Day. 9, representing the interest of 500-plus members, including businesses, local, county, and state governments, and community and tourism entities. 10, stepping up to fill the gaps and unmet needs in the community with volunteer support, promotion of city and community events, hosting Cottonwood's annual Christmas parade, and supporting organizations like the Old Town Association, Senior Center, and more. The impact of the Chamber's efforts has been tremendous. In 2007, the annual amount of bed tax revenue was just over $85,000. Today, that number exceeds $280,000. From 2015 to 2016, bed tax revenue increased by nearly 16%. From 2017 to 2018, bed tax collections increased by 14%. These increases generate a dollar-for-dollar increase in sales tax to the city. These increases are due in large part to the Chamber's unceasing efforts to promote and market Cottonwood and Old Town as a tourist destination. Recently, we took important steps to revitalize our partnership with the city by entering into a new and more clearly defined contract. The Chamber has been open and responsive to all requests from the city, which included new quarterly reports, increased communication regarding expectations, and documentation showing returns on investment. A copy of our tourism proposal and reports to date are attached. In these difficult times, the city and chamber will need to work together to promote tourism and economic development. Our area will have increased competition for tourism, with other destinations all wanting the same visitor. It will require consistent marketing, a steady level of investment, and constant reassurance to visitors about our destination being safe, clean, and ready for their arrival. Our business owners are smart and innovative. We can come back stronger and smarter. The Chamber understands that the current economic situation will necessitate changes to the Chamber's relationship with the city. The Chamber values that relationship and wants to continue a partnership with the city going forward, even if the details of that partnership are different than in the past. This might include a reduction in the amount of bed tax revenue to be paid to the Chamber in exchange for more limited or specifically defined services. The Chamber is willing to consider any and all reasonable options. We invite you to work with us to address these important issues. We would like to schedule a joint work session with the City Council and the Chamber Board to discuss a new vision for our partnership going forward. Please provide us with some available dates, and we'll work with you to get it scheduled as soon as possible. Continuing to invest in the Chamber is an investment in business and in our local community. Sincerely, the Cottonwood Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. That includes Jackie Bessler, who's here with us this afternoon. He's the board chair. Lisa Rhodes, the vice chair. Jessica Ryan, secretary. Janet Kelly, treasurer. Aaron Mayberry, past chair. Darla DeVille, member. Michael Gordon, a member. Chris Taylor, a member. And Mark Tufty, a member. So thanks to you both for being here this evening. And I know we spoke on the phone recently, and this may not be the best place to have that conversation now, but we're all available to you for questions, and we'll be in touch very soon. Okay? Thank you. Council.
I hate to see the chamber lose the entire funding. And I'm the one that can maybe bring some history, and possibly you too, Tim, to where we are today. I'm the one in 2007 that came in, and the hoteliers hated the chamber. And my task was to get the hoteliers together. And the bed tax then was 2%. It was then with the agreement of the hotels to raise it to 3%. So that's a plus. The chamber works, and granted, I'm not objective at this. I will tell you that, but I am going to try to give you some history to it. The APS works with almost all chambers throughout the state. They're a huge proponent of chambers. ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation, is very pro-chamber. They bring in signage, and they bring in signage that directs people into Cottonwood. And they don't charge us for that. And AOT, of course, the chamber is the designated marketing for AOT in the state. They provide grants, and it's just a plus. Now, I'm not saying that we should give them a lot of money. I just hate to see us take everything away for a nonprofit that brings money in. And I don't know of any other nonprofit that actually brings money into the city. So that's a short version of my thinking.
Okay. Well, it's certainly one item of discussion, in the bigger context of the entire budget. So I think we are looking to put $100,000 aside for direct marketing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, we're ultimately in control of the budget. It's just a matter of figuring out what are we going to cut to, displace the funds that we choose, if we choose as a council to put some toward the chamber. So,
And I understand cuts. I get it. And they do too.
any other thoughts from council?
Well, I think the request is a fair one. I'd be interested to hear what other thoughts the chamber had as far as ways to work forward. I value our partnership with the chamber. Unfortunately, the harsh reality right now is, historically we were paying them more than we're expected to receive. We do need to see return on our value. However, having a discussion about how we can work with the chamber, whether it's monetarily or not, I don't know yet. This has been a very challenging budget season for everybody. Thank you to Ms. Lennon and to Rudy and our city manager for your hard work on this budget. But we're dealing with numbers that we still don't have good information.
Right.
So tonight, I don't know, I don't know what this would look like moving forward.
Right.
But the chamber has been a valuable partner. And again, just having there, to me, I would value a conversation about what a partnership looks like moving forward, whether or not we can make any promises as far as money with the numbers we have or what. I don't want to lose the chamber as a valued partner. These are our businesses, the representatives of our local business community.
I think, what we're struggling with more than anything is just how quickly this came on. And so we're, we had a conversation with the chair and president last week, the end of last week, really. And, I am absolutely open to meeting with the chamber board and trying to hash out some details on what our partnership looks like moving forward. It's just there are so many moving pieces. We still don't have the solid numbers in yet. We're kind of trying to do the best that we can.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add, I'm actually, Councilmember Henry is right along the lines I was thinking. So $100,000 set aside for marketing. If that's what council desires, the next steps would be to come back with a plan. There's many options that could or could not include the chamber. It would not be in the same contract that is there now, but the marketing will still need to be done. The partnership with AOT will still need to be done. There's still work that the city's not prepared to do, that we would use that $100,000. The goal with that amount of money is to get it as direct to marketing, whether it be newspaper, magazine, or whatever the marketing is, the creation of those materials, to spend as many of those dollars as possible on marketing our community. And so the plan was, if council was okay with that dollar figure and coming up with a plan, then we'll budget that. I'll come back, later in the process, probably July or August, and figure out how we're going to do that, whether that be an RFP for marketing DMO services, whether that be some other relationship. But really, I wanted to know if this was even close to the right direction as far as the $100,000, less, more. As we heard on Tuesday night, council's still a little concerned about over-marketing right now, bringing too many people in. So she budgeted $201,000 in revenues for bed tax. That's not going to be now. That's not going to be probably July or August. It'll be later. So we won't really have the cash anyways till later in the year. So any advertising we're doing right now is money we've already had budgeted or collected. So I really do think we have time, if council so desires, to spend that amount of money on marketing that relationship. So again, as we spoke last week to the chamber, there's just still a lot of unknowns. This is my first test to see if this is even close to the direction council wants to go, or if we want to go back to the old formula. You guys could tell us that, and we'd have to, find the money. I'm guessing about 150 would be the formula, because it's that percent, not including the half-cent sales tax increase you did. So it's, when you look at the number, you can't just do the math. You got to pull out the increase that you guys approved in 2018. So would we be asking them to do the same thing with $80,000 less? That doesn't really seem fair to me either. So this is really a little bit of a discussion about budgeting a set dollar and then letting me come back later with a plan for you guys to approve to move forward.
I think you're right in line with 100,000. I think that's a reasonable figure, given the state of our budget. And our continuing relationship with the chamber may look different than it ever has in years past. But we're not going to really know what that looks like until we have the time to breathe and get together with the chamber board or just the president and the director and figure out what that plan looks like moving forward. It may be that there are other partners who are willing to come in, like the AOT or APS or others that are bigger funding bodies that could help, fill that gap. So we don't know these things until we have a chance to meet. And, like I said last week, this meeting probably isn't the best place to do that because it's not. I think we need to have a special meeting or put some of the board members together with some, vice mayor or mayor or whoever, whatever that looks like, unless the entire council wants to have a work session, which we can schedule. But to get back to you, I think, this budgeting 100,000, I think, is reasonable given all the other ways that we're being tugged with this year's budget. For what it's worth, those are my thoughts, but everyone's free to share their own.
Are you saying budget 100,000 for the chamber?
No, for
Or
direct
just for
marketing. We don't
For
know what
direct
that,
marketing, sir.
Our own marketing?
well, we don't know what that looks like. They're going to have to come back. We're just looking at budget of spending authority right now.
Okay.
How it's spent, we'll have to
Okay.
decide.
Right. That makes sense.
I think the $100,000 for that looks fine to me, too.
Okay.
I have a question about that $100,000 fund, or figure, Mayor, if I may. Because I know we just added positions, or I thought we just added positions in economic development. So is that marketing, that $100,000 already earmarked for economic development?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Henry, we put the $100,000 budget for marketing in the Economic Development Fund. It could be in city admin, it could be anywhere. It just seemed like the right place to put it right now. That team would help lead the process, coming up with a plan, figuring out what to do. But as you guys are well aware, for example, we're working on an ad for the Phoenix magazine for the July. We did that in-house, but you still have to pay a significant amount of money to get it into the magazine. So we're going to have to work with other partners. There's a couple local photographers that do phenomenal work in our community. We may have to hire them to help us get some good pictures or for our print ads. So that $100,000 is meant to cover whatever we need to make marketing happen next year. It is not for the positions that you approved last year.
That makes sense. I'm following now. Thank you.
AOT is an excellent source to help with.
Absolutely, and in all fairness, we've gone through the chamber for several years on the AOT program. We've talked to them, yes, and of course AOT. And the reason the 100,000 is to hopefully we can get at least 50,000 matching from the AOT. So that was kind of the base point, and then depending on what else we needed to do with other events or marketing or pictures or ads, whatever it is, we just didn't want to cut it too short. And I also didn't want the leap to be too far if we wanted to do something different. So when I asked around about being a successful marketing agency, or you're doing this successfully, 100,000 is barely scratching the surface. Some of our, I believe, when the Verde Valley Canyon Railroad spends, I think, $200,000 to $300,000 annually on their marketing alone. I think the Blazing M spends over $100,000 alone on just their marketing. So you think it's a lot, but it's really not. We did get a good deal for the Phoenix magazine because they're hurting. People aren't paying for subscriptions right now, so they offered us a very good deal, so we were able to do it. We partnered with a local business owner that's doing one page. We're doing a second page, so it'll be Cottonwood on both pages, really. So that's the kind of thing we'll try to do to get those dollars to stretch as far as we can, is partnering and working with our local businesses.
And Sedona spends $2.5 million a year.
Yes.
We're not a Sedona, and we don't want to be a Sedona, but we can kind of tailgate, that's a word, off of them in some respects.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm seeing heads nod all around, so I think we're going to stick with that figure for now and then continue
Thanks,
this
sir.
conversation. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, how does the rest of the budget look to everyone?
I don't have any questions, but, and those have all been addressed already, but you're getting pretty good at this. That's a good presentation. And I tell you, I'll have to say that, yeah, the way the whole thing goes with, a lot of these things weren't even surprises. I knew about them already from you keeping us informed throughout the year. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm planning. So I look at that and I go, oh yeah, that's old news. Another point is just even recently being able to sit down with you and Rudy and Kirsten and being able to kind of intimately look at that and have that dialogue and those conversations. And I mean, I've tried to wrap my head around the Cottonwood budget for 4 years, 2 of them on council. And it is just so much clearer now, so much more easy to understand than that first year or 2 years that I watched those budget presentations, and it was just kind of confusing. It's just really growing and gelling, and really good job to everybody, especially at this time. You had to throw it all out and start over again. So kudos.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, thank you, and I'll let her follow up with the details, but it's not what we wanted it to be. If you remember, we talked about doing program budgeting so that you guys could look at the value, cost, and revenue from programs. She wasn't able to hire a staff member this year. We came back for a mid-year person. You know, then we lost another person in our office. It just has not been the year we wanted it to be. As I said, I think she mentioned it, we were about 7% ahead on sales tax at the end of February. So when we started meeting with staffs, and I was getting ready to meet with you guys about priorities, so I was going to meet with staff to see where we're at, see what the requests were. We were going to meet with you guys and see, you know, what you guys wanted to do or what your priorities were. COVID hit, and we went into a different mode. And as it lingered on, and as they shut down the economy, Kirsten went back and basically redid a whole lot of stuff. So I appreciate your kind words, Vice Mayor. Again, we're not done. We think there's a lot more improvements and things we can do to make it even more transparent and more clear, and give you guys more tools to make decisions on priorities for programming. But stay tuned.
And I have to thank Helen Bartels too. She and I work as a team creating this budget, so she needs to be mentioned at least.
All of you over there.
Yeah.
Well, it was a real pivot to get it back out again under such short notice, and with so many things being just so uncertain right now, and into the near future being so uncertain. You know, we just still don't know what to expect. But I think it's good to have, you know, the spending authority in case we do get those grants that come in, or in case things do get better than we anticipate. But I think it's wise to plan for a worst case scenario. So I'm pleased to see there's some areas in there that we can trim out in case our sales tax really does plummet and we're just not able to make ends meet, which we hope we will. You know, we hope for a good recovery. Of course we do. And there's still a lot of uncertainty with the money that the governor is hiding in his back pocket and is still not letting us know what the plan is there.
For clarity, I saw some faces perk up. So the state got CARES money to go to communities. Most states have delivered that money to the communities. We have not. If you listen to his call earlier this week, he says it's coming. He did not hint on how the formula was going to be created, nor did he give us a deadline. So we have done what we can do. Both Kirsten and Jeff have signed up for FEMA relief, so we're hoping we get some of our costs covered. So, for example, we increased the cleaning of all of our bathrooms. We're hoping that kind of stuff can go. Increased cleaning supplies. It's small numbers, but every little bit helps. So we're working on that. So we hope to get as many CARE grants things as possible. But everything from, remember, we first put our employees on COVID leave. Well, private practice, that was paid for. the private practice has got that paid for. We did not have that paid for. We just did that, the right thing to do. So we're hoping he comes through with some of that money for the small communities. I'm hoping.
And I wanted to say, even the FEMA money is only 90%. So any expenditures that we have that we get is only a 90% reimbursement. We still have to cover the other 10%.
And they're talking maybe about a fourth stimulus, correct, which may include some money directly to municipalities, but that's, who knows?
No, that's up in the air. I heard
Way
today
up
that
in the
the
air.
president is talking about it. Prior to today, it sounded like it was dead on arrival.
Yeah.
But I heard today on the news that the president is considering a fourth.
Right.
Yeah. So, again, underscore uncertain. I mean, we just don't know.
Right.
So, but we've been here before. I mean, we've been through some pretty rough times before, and came out all right. Came out stronger in the end. So,
There's definitely been some ups and downs in the 19 years I've been here. So,
Question?
all right. Yes.
What's the process now?
so now we will start creating our budget document, the actual document, and then we will bring it back to you in June. It's the second regular council meeting in June. We have to post it in the paper 2 weeks before then and put it out to the public as well and make it available. And we'll do all that, and we'll be back for the tentative adoption, which will be basically these numbers. There might be some changes if things get discussed and get changed between then. If I get numbers in and it looks really bad, we might discuss that. But basically, we'll bring back the tentative in June, and then that sets our expenditure limitation, and then we bring back the final in July.
So in June we vote?
Yes,
And
June
we
you
can't
vote.
go up, but we can go down?
Yes.
Okay.
And there'll be a lot of opportunity, difficult as it is with physical distancing and all that, but for the public to
Yes.
hear from staff on the budget, and we're always open to receiving input from the public at any time throughout the process. So, and of course there'll be hearings as well. But I think probably the best way now moving forward in these times is just to email council and staff directly with questions or concerns about the budget. So we're still as open as ever to hear from the public on this.
Mr. Mayor, we're hopeful. Last year, public participation was low except for the civic groups, and the civic groups haven't started meeting yet, but Rudy will be reaching out to them if they are, and we'll try to attend as many of those as we can. Hopeful. Back to Councilmember Wilden's question, though, this is really the best time to start if we've missed the mark. If you want to move money significantly from one place to another, tonight's a great night to tell us that so we can start building the document. After tonight or after the next week or so, we like to make smaller changes. So this would be a great night. Or we can schedule another budget meeting as we move along. If you guys, last year we had 2 nights. We ended up doing it one night. We actually had 2 nights scheduled earlier in April, I think it was. We were going to do 2 nights. So at the council's pleasure, if we want to have another meeting in a week or two, at some point we need to create the document, and we want to be real close once we start to do that again, depending on numbers.
Okay. Councilmember Holst, you had a question, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's okay. I'm kind of concerned. At the January 2020 Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, we discussed several grants for Parks and Rec on our 5-year capital improvement plan. And several of these grants are 100% funded, so we don't have to do match. Mr. Allen was working on some grants here that I'm going to read to you and projects for fiscal year 2021. The Land Water Conservation Funds for the Riverfront Park soccer field development funds, including paying for design of the fields with a 50% match, and the cost on that in kind would be 50%. The estimated cost to complete the soccer fields is between $1 and $1.5 million. I realize that's probably beyond our ability under the circumstance. It was also working on, heritage funds with Fish and Game for the Riverfront Park development, funds for the pond at the Riverfront Park, Don't have a price on that, but Tom Wetmer was working on that with the state because of using reclaimed water. Heritage funds from state parks for the Riverfront Park Development Funds. That was supposed to be for more of the completion of Riverfront. State Parks Trail Signage Grant, which was a $10,000 grant for Del Monte Wash signage. Again, no matching funds required. State Parks Trail Maintenance Grant is a $10,000 grant for maintaining trail systems with no matching funds required. State Park Trails Grant, right now we're using up a $110,000 grant that we received last year. In 2 years, we could apply for an additional $80,000 for that Riverfront Park project. Katina Foundation, this one involved Mr. Scott and Mr. Allen, who were working on the grant together, for a possibility of no less than $75,000 to complete or for the construction of the Del Monte Wash Trail. And no matching funds again, and possibly at the end of that grant, the completion of that trail work, even larger grants to complete the whole trail system from them, again with no matching funds. USDA solar program, I know we mentioned solar, and Mr. Allen was working with Solar One on developing a proposal for solar at the rec center. The projection at the time that we had the meeting was $244,000 to do the solar. Mr. Allen had been working with Solar One and had it down to approximately $180,000, which was a $64,400 savings. And the projected savings once the solar was installed was an annual savings of at least $50,000 on energy costs a year for the rec center. A Arizona Community or AZ Community Foundation, Mr. Allen was working on a grant for stage lighting here at the clubhouse, which was a $10,000 grant with no matching funds. An APS grant for providing cultural programs at the clubhouse, $5,000 with no matching funds. My questions are, because Mr. Allen and Mr. Scott were riffed and are no longer working on improving the quality of life in Cottonwood through these grants, failure to complete these grant applications in a timely fashion could result in the city losing tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money for the city. Who will be picking up the slack on these grants and completing the grant applications and projects and submitting them for consideration and application?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hulse, good question, fair questions. So we have reallocated duties to different people. So most of the trails work will go to community development. So Gary, one of our planners there, has done trails in his past. So he will pick up a lot of that work. Tricia, our Tourism Economic Development Director, we believe outdoor trails has to do with economic development and will be a tourist attraction for us. I sit on a committee that talks about the outdoor economics and the impact. One of the reasons Sedona is busy is because of the trails. If you've walked our Del Monte Trail, I believe it is a beautiful, great trail that is different than anything Sedona has to offer. So we have Gary that will be helping with that. We also have Tricia who will be responsible for land acquisitions. So I noticed there were several of the grants attached to Del Monte Trail. We have, I've decided that we have to work differently on that trail. When I talked to the neighbors that own some of the land in there, they hadn't really been approached a whole lot about the trails, and some of the owners that we've been having trouble getting land from weren't even excited about the trail. So we're not ready to start improving Del Monte Trail until we can get a Del Monte Trail. So we've got several land transactions that we need to happen and work on before we start building a trail that would like start in the middle of the city and not really be connected to anything. The long-term plan for that trail is to connect Mingus Mountain to Old Town to further up into Sedona and part of the Sun Corridor. But we've got 3 significant obstacles in the way before we start spending money on a trail that we don't know how the lines are going to connect yet, that we've been made aware of, so we've just got some work on the Del Monte Trail. The Riverfront Trail is, we are currently working on that right now. So Gary, again, will be responsible for the grant. We're engaged with the consultant. David and Robert from Public Works will help with the construction and review. Just got an email back yesterday, the day before, about the design. Robert reviewed the designs from the consultant for the Riverfront Trail. Very excited about it. It has some significant issues on the design that we need to work out. Rudy has been involved greatly with the trails. So the trail is up against the ditch, and so we're in negotiations right now with the Ditch Association to come to an agreement on where we can put the trail versus in the middle of the driveway versus in the trees. So we're in the middle of that. So Rudy, Gary's responsible. Robert and David from Public Works are working on the building, and of course the deputy, the assistant city manager is kind of leading those efforts. We have one person that we moved from the rec center that was doing reservations, was mostly what she was doing. She has some untapped skills and talents. I have her in city admin right now, not really for city admin, but for the airport. So because we're not doing reservations right now, I didn't want to cut us too thin. I tried to make smart reductions. So we moved her budget from Rec Center and Parks and Rec over to Economic Development for now until we figure out exactly what her long-term job is. But we have some issues at the airport that we need to fix, and she's been helping with that. She's been organizing and getting some things done to help Mark, who's supposed to be a part-time airport manager. A great resource there. I believe she has the talents to write grants and do those kinds of things. And under our leadership for trails of Gary in community development, which isn't uncommon, in the city of Yuma, our community development department did the trails master plan. They did the bike trail plan. They worked on, because a lot of times trails are seen as commuting, as it's not the right word, but a way to get around, not just recreation. So I believe we have trails covered very, very well. Some of the other large grants you were talking about, I don't expect the state to have that money in the next couple of years. If you saw the HERF funding, they canceled 2 years worth of projects, and even 17 they said eliminated, and 17 projects a pretty big deal. So I don't think the state's going to have a whole lot of grant money, and I don't think we would have the money to budget half of the soccer fields just yet, because in addition to the soccer fields, we have to move 2 other things. We have to move the dog park, and we have to make sure that I don't want to get egged, but the garden has to be addressed. And I don't know exactly how all of that works out yet. So while we are ready to start applying for grants, we're not, as a city and an organization, yet ready to do some of those bigger projects. We're going to concentrate on trails. I think this council's been very clear that outdoor economics is a big deal and a priority for this council. So we've set aside the resources to make sure that those types of things can be done. You know, we finished the pickleball courts this year. We got that up and running. Jack and Rudy are working with Yavapai College to get grants for the indoor gymnasium. So there's a curtain in there, and the curtain needs to be fixed. It's a big curtain. We use it a lot. Pickleball's on one side, volleyball on one side. But YC wants to put their logo on that, and they'll pay for not just the curtain, but the mechanical equipment to up and raise it. So we're continuing to work with YC through Rudy and otherwise. Rudy is also working with YC on transit issues. Our current new dean, Dr. Redding, we met with her not too long ago, and she's very excited about transit. They haven't decided where they're going to put their new building, and it may be further out towards Camp Verde, and we've talked about offering transit for them. So the partnerships that we've created in the community as far as Parks and Rec and the Rec Center, we're going to continue. I feel very, very strong that we can meet all of those, especially given that some of the grants aren't going to be available. Those that have cash, for example, the $10,000 from the Friends for Del Monte Trail, we think we can still do that with David over in Public Works because it's a construction, it's a very small area. We're well aware of that. So again, we think we have the work reassigned or plan to be reassigned to make sure that we don't miss a beat.
So are we going to apply for any of these grants?
Yes, you said for any of the grants?
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll get a report when the heritage funds come out or when the budget is announced. We will get in line. We love free money. There's some other grants that we didn't talk about that we're also working on with the Nature Conservancy. They've given us some money or offered to give us some money at the library. So we want to do a water retention. So take the water from the roof, help them garden their garden program that they have. We have folks working on that. They also 6th Street drainage project. And one of the ideas there is to create an open park in that area, open space, kind of like you see in the bigger cities where they use the basins to play in and those kinds of things. So we're going to continue on that. So yes, we plan to apply for as many as we can and keep moving. Again, we believe we have the administrative staff that can help us and the leadership under Rudy, under that side of the house, Jack, Scott Ellis in community development for trails. I think we're set to be just as successful as we have been and add to the great things that they've done in the past.
Okay. Would it be possible for the council to have a report on the grants that we are going to continue on and also on the grants that we're not going to pursue that were being pursued prior to coronavirus?
Yes, sir.
On a monthly basis to show what's being done and that the grant applications are being prepared appropriately and properly on time, and include any progress on the above-mentioned projects. One that I should have mentioned and didn't is I understand that FEMA is willing to provide us with an emergency generator for no cost at the rec center. The only cost would be our city electrician connecting it to the rec center, and this was something that I understood was your idea, to use the rec center in the event of an emergency, for emergency housing, I assume. Is that correct?
Well, not emergency housing, but just in case there's an emergency. Remember 2 winters ago, one of our senior sitters lost electricity, and we didn't really have a backup place. That side of town lost, including the rec center, and so we didn't have a big enough place. So one of the ideas the leadership team talked about was emergency generators, and Robert is our FEMA coordinator, and so he is working on that. I do not know where we're at. FEMA switched their priorities to respond to COVID, so a lot of things that they had going on. We're concerned about the grant for Old Town, which I think is a huge thing. If we can get the Old Town out of the floodplain, I think that would make it more affordable for redevelopment and growth. We haven't been directly told by FEMA that they're too busy to do other things, but we're all kind of waiting to see, what happens with FEMA. But yeah, Robert's handling that one, Mr. Winnicky, our city engineer. That's his project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Nairn.
I'd like to talk about, last year we moved the money that was going to go to the pension liability over to the sidewalks, and I was really pleased with that decision because, as it has been explained to us, that makes a very, very small dent in the pension liability, but we could do something very, very tangible and in the benefit of our community. So I'd like to talk about the possibility of doing that or something similar to that again with the money this year.
It seemed like last year the council was pretty much on board with that. I think, if it's all right with council, I think you're already having Robert prepare a list of items, correct?
He is, and of course, Mr. Mayor, if I can, he presented the priority list for you guys last year, so he'll just start on that and see, he'll take her budgeted amount of 200 and something thousand and see how far it'll go. You guys have made your priority list. So we finished one sidewalk, and then the other two are this close. The plans are done. We actually had already notified the neighborhood on Main Street. We'd already went out and talked to them about the project. So we're ready. We're just kind of waiting to make sure the cash is there after July. So you have one complete sidewalk out of all that money last year. Sorry. But you have two more that are the orders are out. We're ready to start digging. So after July, those should be done by fall. And then so this 200,000 plus, I don't remember what the number was, we can bring that back in the June meeting. I think would be the best time so you can see it as we'll have hopefully better numbers by June again. Again, I don't think we'll have final numbers till July, but we'll have a clue and make sure that that's what you want to do. And I couldn't agree with you more, Councilmember Nairn. it's a black hole still over at PSPRS, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. It just, well, you can ask your two finance people what they recommend you doing with it.
Right.
Don't put it in PSPRS.
Well, and we've clearly showed that our overall debt is coming down,
Yes.
and it's coming down and it's coming down. So I think doing something more tangible to benefit the community would be a good idea.
I agree. Mr. Mayor, if I can have Kirsten explain, some reporting changes will be coming up, so there'll be a small bump in our debt with the enterprise loans or something. Is the reporting of debt going to change again?
There is a new GASB that changes how we report our debt that's supposed to be effective as of July 1st. So our auditors, when they come in, will work with me on how we report that.
So it may change. It's not big compared to our overall debt, but just wanted to give you a heads up that the money hasn't changed, the amount owed hasn't changed, but some of the reporting mechanisms over this next year will change.
Okay.
Mayor, Council, let me, if you don't mind, I'm kind of hidden over here, Ron, so just wanted to chime in. Those of you who have been around for, have tenure, as council may recall, that at our height, we were at about $65 million back in 2006 and 7. So we've come down dramatically. So just wanted to point that out. We're about halfway of what we were back nearly 10 years ago or so. This is only a portion from 2010. It was 65 million a few years prior to this particular graph.
And I am very, very pleased to see that.
We are too.
Everyone is, yeah. So one other thing that's kind of outstanding has to do with the magistrate is whether or not we want to bring her from a 0.6 to 0.8 full-time position, given that they're going to postpone hiring that clerk who moved on to Camp Verde. So is that something that council is comfortable with in the budget? Should we bring back a contract for consideration that would include that?
I am all in favor of that. I think
Okay.
it's value to the city at a very reasonable cost.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur on
agree.
that.
Okay. Yes,
She's done a tremendous job as a judge and worked much more than what we were paying her to straighten out what apparently was a bigger mess than I think any of us realized.
Mr. Mayor, Council, as you all, most of you remember, because you were all on council when this happened during the last magistrate's tenure, when he was a full-time equivalent, and council discussed during a budgeting process reducing that. There was, I'd done an analysis and a comparison with other jurisdictions and came back to you, and there seemed to be, it was a range of between a 0.6 and a 0.8. And at the time, if you'll recall, I was leaning toward thinking that our caseload justified a 0.8 FTE back then, and council's decision was to bring it down to a 0.6, but acknowledging that there may come a time, and it looks like this may be the time, when a 0.8 was appropriate and justified.
Okay, thank you.
And so we would need a new contract.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Right? Isn't that correct?
Councilmember Henry, I didn't hear the question.
I don't have it in front of me, but I thought we'd have to then enter into another contract. I thought we were locked in at the 0.6 in the current one.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Henry, through our wonderful city attorney, we'll bring you back an amendment to the contract.
Simple amendment.
It's simple. Because the contract did have the number of hours, the FTE load.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and there's a couple other outstanding things, I think, the conversation with Humane Society, a continuing conversation with the Chamber, but I think overall it sounds like we're all on board, I would say, with what we've been presented with tonight. As on board as we can be.
I think so.
Okay. Then how would you like to proceed? Would you like to have staff then just hone in on the numbers and continue forward with the scheduled meetings?
Mr. Mayor, if I can just leave a thought. I know the $500,000 grant, so we always budget a $500,000 grant just in case. And then we added another $500,000 grant that matches our CIP list. Just so you know, we won't automatically do anything. We will come back to you, say, here's our revenue, and this is what we want to do. I think that we need to really, again, the employees to be able to get a raise in January would be a great thing if we could do that. So really, we've created capacity to do some things. So I hope you keep the $500,000 for the thing in there, but just so you know, you're not locked in to how we spend that or what we do. We'll come back with what our revenue is, actuals, and then say this is above budget. We have the budget authority. Do you want to move forward with any of these items? The one thing that was kind of in here that I just want to make sure that you know is the radio study for the police department. So we're all concerned about the radio system over there, the connections, and the study is in here, and the study is both what the PD and IT asked for. So we're going to do the study next year, and then probably get the price tag the following year. But we are moving forward with that. So we did put some things in here that we think are a priority for council, including the PD.
A question?
Please.
I know that this whole process involves public hearings, and at this point, we're not encouraging them to come. So what is the plan for doing the public hearings, given the restrictions on people gathering?
Mr. Mayor, sorry, Councilmember Naren, we will follow the guidelines offered by the governor. So
It's June.
Right.
It's mid-June.
Mid-June, so what is mid-June?
The next would be the public hearings.
Yeah, the public hearing for the tentative budget's not till June, so we've got about 3 or 4 weeks to figure this out. So we've talked about a couple different things for next week. One is to just open it up and then talk to 1 or 2 people at a time. So the rules right now are less than 10 with social distancing. So there'd be 3 or 4 of us. We could talk to 3 or 4 at a time, and we'll just stay around until people leave. So they get one-on-one interaction with staff here at the clubhouse. Later on, we might actually be able to go to clubs. That's what we're hoping. So if any organization starts to meet, we'll go to those meetings if allowed. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can. We are going to talk about it on Inside Cottonwood in Monday, I think it is. We're talking
Tuesday. Monday's
Tuesday.
a holiday.
We're off on Monday, right? Tuesday we're doing Inside Cottonwood. So we'll let people know to email me if they have questions or to talk and those kinds of things. So Inside Cottonwood. Public hearing next week, employee meeting next week, and then we're putting ourselves out there for other meetings.
So that sounds like the town halls we tried to do last year.
Yes.
So my concern was about the public hearing itself, where they should be able to come and chime into the council about their opinions.
Right. We'll be following the guidance from the governor. This is already beginning to push it. You know, some boards still aren't meeting in person like this. They're still meeting online. So we really encourage, and this reminded me, Mr. Mayor, I thought you had this, and in all fairness, I want to read a letter we got that Mary Ann gave to me a few minutes ago. So thank you for reminding me, ma'am.
Can I say one thing really fast? All these documents are also on our website, on the finance page. Everything you received is out there for them to look at as well. So if they want to read the budget and see what everything is, it is available for everyone.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean to speak out of turn, but I think my takeaway from last year was city staff, our finance department, city manager, deputy city manager, everybody was open, available, willing via phone, email, call and make an appointment to visit, and we didn't get the turnout. So we, in addition to being available, making ourselves available, we tried to schedule the budget meetings, and I was at one for about 5 minutes before I had to excuse myself for something else. And I don't know that we had anybody show up for that one besides city staff. So I think that the same would hold true this year. If folks have questions about the budget, reach out to our city manager, our deputy city manager, our finance department, your council members, because we can get you to where you need to be to get this information. So I don't want the pandemic to leave folks with questions about how we're proposing to spend the money. And again, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think we are doing, honestly, an A+ when it comes to transparency and communication about the budget on our end. Folks need to reach out, though.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Henry, yes. And we'll remind them on Inside Cottonwood. I don't know that anybody watches me on Inside Cottonwood, but if they do, I will remind them. It's my least favorite part of the job, I'm not going to lie. To call. And I do answer emails on a regular basis. and questions that I get, phone calls, and Sandra keeps a log, and so, or I don't know if she keeps a log, but she makes sure I return those phone calls and get back. And sometimes, so if you get a call from City Hall late at night or 6, 7 o'clock at night, it might be me. I mean, I try not to go home before I return most calls, so don't hesitate. If I may, Mr.
Please.
Mayor, I'm going to read. So to Cottonwood City Council regarding termination of Hez Allen. I've been advised that due to the virus, I may not be able to attend the budget meeting of 5/21/2020, so I'm putting my comments in writing to be presented at the meeting. I have also previously sent comments to Mayor Alinsky and several other city council members, but I am unsure if those comments will be shared. I have worked at the Cottonwood Recreation Center for 6 years as a part-time cashier. I have a master's in counseling and guidance and a background in human resources. Because of my background, I observe behavior. That is just what I do. During the 6 years at the rec center, I have found Mr. Allen to be outstanding in his interactions with staff and customers, and his work ethic appears flawless. His interactions are also professional, and he always appears to embrace the goals and objectives of the city. He is a 14-year servant of the city. It is my understanding that Mr. Allen was terminated at the direction of the city manager without input from city council. I also believe that he was not given an opportunity as interim recreation center manager to step back into his previous position or any other position. I find that to be unbelievable. I supported the election of many of the city council members and believe that you were elected to make help make these hard decisions. I can only imagine how disrespected some of you must feel, not even having had prior knowledge of the actions that were taking place. Please know that many of the citizens of Cottonwood are very distressed by these actions, as evidenced by input from them on Nextdoor and also other input provided. Many have worked with Mr. Allen on community projects through the years and have interactions with him frequently through the recreation center activities. I understand the budgetary constraints that are present due to the virus situation, but I urge you to reconsider this decision and look at any and all alternatives that are possible. Respectfully submitted, Joyce Rogers, citizen of Cottonwood.
Thank you for your direction.
Thank you. Are we good? Okay.
I'm not clear. So are we having a conversation about the chamber later?
I think maybe Ron and I can get together and discuss that. If the council wants to have a work session, we can schedule something like that with the chamber board, but maybe you and I should have a conversation that we can get information to the council, and then we can decide if we want to make that happen. I don't know how much time we have to meet with them. I think we're looking at really just setting our expenditure limitation. When does their contract run out?
Mr. Mayor, the contract ends June 30th.
Okay.
I did not budget for a contract.
Right.
Based on what I heard here tonight, we were looking at a marketing program. So unless you guys say something different, the idea is we're not moving forward in the traditional sense. I love the chamber, and I think it has an important part in our community, but it'll be a different relationship. So what I'd like to do is after July 1 at some point, come back with council on a marketing plan and figure out how we want to pick who helps us. We can't do it all. That was never the plan for us to do it all. We're going to help with it, but I'd like to come back in July, probably not the budget meeting, but the next meeting with a plan, and you guys direct us on how to move. We're not going to have a lot of cash out of the bed tax at that time anyway, so I think we have a little while to come up with a good plan, and we'll bring you a couple options on how to move forward. But I did not get the impression that we were working on a traditional contract tonight.
And I encouraged when I met with Jackie Vessler, the chair, and the CEO, Christian, to reach out to council members individually if they had questions, just wanted to start to discuss their plan with council. So to come up with some kind of a strategy for how we could move forward and meet with individual council members to discuss that. So I don't know if that's happened with any individual council members yet, but I did encourage them to. So
the board seems to have been silent for quite some time. And I know not everybody's going to agree or disagree with this, but there needs to be a frank conversation with them. The issue is not just money. And it's about time that we need to talk to the board about that.
okay.
But I think you're hitting on an important point. I'm not talking about money per se. I'm talking about communication and a relationship. So again, if our goal is let's have a conversation before July, et cetera, I'm fine with that. I'm not saying here we need to pay X or anything like that. I just think we should have that conversation. I think it would be good or more efficient as a group. And I also, again, the timing that you propose sounds good, as long as we're clearly communicating that to the chamber as well so they can be prepared.
And I do agree with that. That's a good idea. Everybody needs to get everything out in the open.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, if you remember, they were trying to do that very thing before COVID hit. They had planned a work session where they were going to work on their strategic plan, so they're very much on board for that. And then COVID hit and they had to cancel. So I think we plan on doing something like that and talk about what the relationship looks like and the roles and how we're going to move forward after we can do that, once we can actually meet.
And that's fair. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing then is the council would like to have a work session with the board, with the chamber board, to discuss our...
I would. I think I'm hearing that there are concerns that may or may not have been voiced. I see areas for improvement as well. So I think it would be good to have a conversation. But this move, I also want to nurture that relationship. These are our businesses. You know, as a small business owner myself, I value what support the chamber does give to our businesses.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
Okay. And then time is of the essence if the contract's running out, so we should try to get that scheduled as quickly as COVID allows, I guess. I don't know how.
Well, Mr. Mayor, that's not what I heard, with all due respect. Go ahead, Councilmember Henry.
You're exactly right. I'm not saying let's renew a contract. I'm saying let's sit down and let's talk about how we move forward, whether there is a contract involved or whether it's please help us with our marketing and here's the what we're going to do, and let's come, because this is also 1 year. It doesn't necessarily mean in future years we don't want a partnership. So to me, I would just like to have a conversation, folks.
Yeah, and on my part, I see it as we're going to move forward with our plan now. And then we'll have a conversation with them about how things are going to look in the future.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, so we've set aside that money for marketing. I'll come back to you later in the year about how best to use that or manage it more than anything, using local businesses or local organizations or whatever we need to do there. In the meantime, almost on a side, we need to meet with the chamber to talk about the issues and talk about moving forward. Even if it's I think Vice Mayor said if it's a year restart and we go back to a traditional contract the next year, we can kind of begin that conversation. We have time. Okay. Unless council directs me otherwise, I'm hoping we can wait till we can meet in person. As you know, Mr. Mayor, meeting in person means a lot more and you get a lot more feelings across. So I don't think it'll be before July. I just can't imagine that working.
Okay.
And I don't think it has to be, since we're not looking to renew their contract.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm getting
I still think somebody, and it can be me, needs to tell them they still have time left on their contract. So if they can make improvements now, so be it. Does that make sense?
Yes, but we've notified them that I did not plan to renew the contract unless you guys said something different. So they're moving down that direction.
Right.
We don't have the money set aside for a traditional contract.
Sure.
So I don't know that I would leave that out there, that this year, 21, would be normal.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
They still have time this year left
to do
on
a
their
lot.
contract.
1 month.
Month. It's a month.
Yes.
At least it can start the process. That's all I'm saying.
No, I agree. And I can't imagine not working with them. I've worked in several communities where the chamber is not the marketing arm. I just think not saying they can't be the marketing arm, but there's just so many different ways we can slice this pie and make this work. Because really, Councilmember Henry, I think this is what you're referring to. The bottom of the day is we want to help our businesses be successful. Right. So we need to talk about, you guys and their board need to talk about what that relationship looks like to the benefit of our businesses.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so we'll look at a meeting with them in July. It sounds like it's pretty clear that we're not renewing the contract at this point, but we'll meet with them in July and discuss next steps forward. Okay. I just want to make sure that's communicated to them clearly so that they're not anticipating something different or have different expectations.
And if I can, Mr. Mayor, COVID allowing.
Correct.
Governor allowing the meetings to occur.
Correct.
So I'd like to, July, August, depending on what happens.
Yeah, as much as we can do to not meet via Zoom, it's the worst. It's the worst. Although it's been nice to.
Jury trial or jury selection by Zoom.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
We're not, but,
Oh.
just trying to think of alternatives for reopening.
Yeah.
I was sharing that with the
Yeah.
mayor earlier, not to go off on a tangent, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Council,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. All right, then, if there's nothing else, I would move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Henry seconded it. All in favor? Aye. Adjourn.